Most American gardeners spend $400 every spring on flowers that are already dead by October. Not because they made bad choices, because nobody told them there was a permanent option sitting right next to those annuals at the garden center the whole time. 11 plants, 1 purchase each, and a garden that fills itself back up every single spring without you spending a single dollar to make it happen. Number 8 on this list grows in ground so poor and so dry that most plants would be dead within 2 weeks. And it blooms for 4 straight months without 1 drop of water from you. Before plant number 1. If you have ever watched a gardening video and walked away with nothing you could actually use in your own yard, that is not your fault. Most gardening content is vague, general, and built for no one in particular. Every plant covered on Garden Roots comes with exact bloom windows, exact soil requirements, exact USDA hardiness zones, and the single most common mistake American gardeners make with that specific plant. That combination is what makes the difference between a plant that performs and one that disappoints. Subscribe to Garden Roots right now, not at the end. Right now. Because the people who get the most out of this channel are the ones who never miss a video. And the only way to guarantee that is to press that button before this goes any further. Plant number 1. Black-eyed Susan. Black-eyed Susan has been growing along American roadsides, in empty lots, and around the foundations of abandoned houses for decades. Nobody waters those plants. Nobody feeds them. Nobody does a single thing to help them survive. And every summer they come back and bloom as reliably and as beautifully as the first year they appeared. That alone tells you everything you need to know about how tough this plant is. Put it in an actual garden bed with even basic attention, and the performance it delivers will genuinely surprise you. Those bright golden yellow petals surrounding a deep chocolate brown center are not subtle. That color contrast stops people in their tracks from across the yard. It holds its intensity through brutal afternoon heat that bleaches the petals off lesser plants, and it photographs better than almost anything else blooming in the summer garden. Plants grow upright, 2 to 3 feet tall, structured, confident, and strong enough to anchor a bed without ever needing staking. Most perennials give you 4 to 6 weeks of color, and then they are finished for the season. Black-eyed Susan blooms from late June straight through October. 4 full months. You will still have fresh flowers on these plants when the first light frost arrives in fall. Full sun, a minimum of 6 direct hours every day. Poor soil, clay soil, sandy soil, compacted ground that other plants flat out refuse to grow in. This plant handles all of it without complaint. Soil pH between 6.0 and 7.0, which is exactly where the natural ground in most American yards already sits without any amendment needed. USDA hardiness zones 3 through 9. That range covers gardeners from Minnesota and Maine all the way down to Texas and Florida. After 1 full growing season of establishment, Black-eyed Susan becomes genuinely drought tolerant. Travel during summer, forget to water for 2 weeks, go through a dry stretch that seems like it will never end. It keeps right on blooming through all of it. Goldfinches and sparrows cling directly to those dried seed head stems through January and February, feeding from them when every other food source in the yard has disappeared. Every seed head left standing is also next year's free plant already forming. Black-eyed Susan self-seeds reliably and generously without any help from you. The original planting expands outward on its own every season, covering bare ground, filling in surrounding areas, and producing new plants that cost you absolutely nothing. The mistake that costs most gardeners their best results with this plant is removing every spent flower the moment it fades. They do it because a tidy garden feels like a well-managed one. Remove some spent blooms, the ones within easy reach, to push the plant toward new bud production. Leave the rest standing. Those are not dead flowers. Those are a winter food supply for the birds in your yard and next season's free plants already in progress. Gardeners in zones 8 and 9 choose a spot that gets morning sun and afternoon shade. The intensity of summer heat in the deep south and southwest, without any relief at all, shortens the bloom window. Morning sun and afternoon shade in those zones gives you the longest possible color period and keeps the plants out of heat stress during the worst weeks of July and August. Plant number 2. Salvia garden centers across America have been selling the wrong version of this plant for years. If you have ever bought salvia as an annual, watched it bloom for a few weeks, and then watched it slowly decline and die, what you purchased was a completely different species. The perennial salvia covered right now blooms not once but 3 separate times in a single growing season and comes back to do the exact same thing every year for the rest of your gardening life. Deep violet to purple flower spikes on strong upright stems, 18 to 24 inches tall. The color is among the most saturated and jewel-toned of any perennial available to American gardeners today. It does not fade in heat. It does not wash out in full sun. That rich, intense purple holds from the moment the flowers open until the moment you cut the plant back. The compact mounding growth habit makes it perfect for the front or middle of any border, tidy enough to look intentional, substantial enough to create real visual weight in the bed. First bloom comes in late spring. Cut it back hard, all the way down to 4 to 6 inches from the ground, and within 3 weeks, a completely fresh set of stems pushes up from the base. A full second flush of bloom follows in midsummer. Cut it back again after that second round, and many plants produce a third flush of flowers in early fall. 3 complete bloom cycles from one plant in one season. No other commonly available perennial delivers that kind of value for the ground it occupies. Full sun, 6 or more hours every day. Well-draining soil. Perennial salvia does not tolerate standing water or consistently wet conditions. Soil pH between 5.5 and 7.0. Highly drought-tolerant once established. USDA hardiness zones 4 through 8. Deer will not touch it. The aromatic foliage that smells pleasant to you is deeply unappealing to deer. Gardeners in zones 5 through 7 across the Mid-Atlantic, the Midwest, and the Northeast deal with serious deer pressure every single season. Perennial salvia gives those gardeners rich, saturated color without the heartbreak of walking outside one morning to find everything eaten to the ground overnight. The mistake most people make with this plant is treating the cutback like something optional. Skip it because the plant still looks acceptable and you get one weakening bloom period that fades into thin, exhausted growth by July. Follow through on the cutback after each flush and you get 3 full, unrich bloom cycles from late spring through early fall. That difference comes down to one decision made in late spring with a pair of garden shears. If perennial salvia is the first time you have ever heard that a plant sold as an annual at your local garden center has a completely different perennial version that blooms 3 times a season, that is exactly the kind of thing Garden Roots covers every single week. Specific, accurate, useful in your actual yard. Subscribe right now and turn the notification bell on. The next video on this channel covers something that will change how you approach fall planting completely, and you will want to be there for it. Plant number 3, coneflower. Native communities across this country used coneflower medicinally for centuries before the first American garden center ever opened its doors. Monarch butterflies, swallowtail butterflies, American goldfinches, and bees all visit it at the same time throughout the growing season. 4 straight months of blooms without deadheading, without fertilizing, and without any meaningful attention from the person who planted it, in soil that would outright kill most other flowering plants in a matter of weeks. The flowers are immediately recognizable. Daisy-shaped, with swept-back petals surrounding a raised dome-shaped center that starts green, deepens into bronze, and becomes more architecturally striking as the season moves forward. The original purple is only the beginning. Warm orange, deep red, soft pink, pure white, golden yellow, rich magenta. Every color option works in almost any garden setting because that raised central cone gives every single variety the same unmistakable silhouette. That shape reads clearly from 20 feet away and holds genuine visual interest even after the petals drop completely. 2 to 5 feet tall depending on the variety chosen. Shorter compact types belong at the front and middle of borders. Taller varieties go at the back where they create real structural presence for the entire bed. Coneflower blooms from July straight through October. 4 solid months running through the heart of American summer and deep into fall when most of the garden has already stopped producing. Full sun to light shade. Clay soil. Sandy soil. I'm poor unamended ground. Coneflower grows in conditions most flowering perennials refuse to tolerate. pH 6.0 to 7.0. Moderate drought tolerance once established. USDA hardiness zones 3 through 9, covering virtually every gardener across the continental United States. The seed heads that form after the petals drop in late summer carry more ecological value than the flowers themselves. American goldfinches are drawn back to gardens specifically because of coneflower seed heads. They cling to dried stems and feed directly from the cones through fall and straight into the coldest weeks of winter. Cut your coneflowers down in fall cleanup and you strip away one of the most reliable cold weather food sources available to the birds living in your yard. Leave the entire plant standing through winter. The stem structure protects the crown from the repeated freeze-thaw cycles that cause more perennial winter damage than cold temperatures alone. Cut back in late February or very early March, after the worst of winter has passed, but before new growth pushes up from the base. That timing gives you maximum wildlife benefit through winter and maximum plant health going into spring. Which of these 3 plants, Black-eyed Susan, Salvia, or Coneflower, is already growing somewhere in your yard right now? And which one are you adding this season? Drop both answers in the comments below. Every single comment on this channel gets read, and the answers to that question every week shape what Garden Roots covers next. Plant number 4. Daylily. Walk through any older American neighborhood right now and look at the yards of houses that have been empty for months. No one is cutting the grass. No one is pulling weeds. No one is doing a single thing to maintain those properties. And somewhere in almost every one of those neglected yards, daylilies are blooming. Full, beautiful, completely unbothered by the fact that nobody has watered them since the previous owner moved out. That is not luck. That is the genetic constitution of a plant, so tough and so self-sufficient that neglect genuinely does not slow it down. Give a daylily an actual home, decent soil, the right amount of sun, division every few years, and what it produces will stop visitors in their tracks every single summer for the rest of your life. And trumpet-shaped blooms in a color range that covers almost the entire spectrum: orange, yellow, red, pink, burgundy, lavender, cream, and complex bicolors that combine 2 or 3 of those shades inside a single flower. The one color daylilies do not come in is true blue. Every other option exists somewhere among the thousands of named varieties available to American gardeners today. Each individual flower lasts exactly 1 day. That is where the name originates. But each flowering stem carries multiple buds that open in sequence over several weeks. One closes and another opens the very next morning. The display is continuous rather than a single spectacular burst followed by nothing, which means one established clump gives you weeks of uninterrupted color from a single plant. The grass-like foliage that remains after the bloom period ends is dense enough to actively suppress weeds in the surrounding soil. The plant is doing useful, practical work for your garden even during the weeks it is not flowering. 1 to 4 feet tall, depending on the variety. Full sun to partial shade, making daylily one of the most placement-flexible perennials on this entire list. Soil pH 6.0 to 6.5, moderate water needs. USDA hardiness zones 3 through 10. That is the widest cold hardiness range of any plant covered in this video. If you garden anywhere in the continental United States, daylilies will survive your winters without question and without any special protection. A single clump planted this spring doubles in size every 2 to 3 years as the root system expands and produces new growth. Within 5 years, i.e. that one original plant contains enough material to divide into 8 to 12 individual sections. Every division can be replanted throughout the yard or passed along to a neighbor, a family member, or a friend who wants to start their own garden. The initial purchase price, typically $8 to $15 at a garden center, becomes effectively zero over time because you keep generating healthy flowering plants from that original investment at no additional cost. Division is also the key to keeping daylilies performing at their absolute best. When a clump becomes overcrowded, usually every 3 to 5 years, the center of the clump starts producing fewer flowers while the outer edges stay vigorous and full. That declining center is your signal. Dig up the entire clump in early spring or early fall. Use a sharp spade to separate it into sections of 3 to 5 fans each and replant those sections immediately. Every one of them establishes quickly and blooms the following season. The single care mistake that costs daylily growers the most is removing the foliage the moment the bloom period ends. Those leaves are still actively sending energy back down into the root system through photosynthesis after every flower is gone. Every week of foliage removed early is stored energy that never reaches the roots, energy that was meant to fuel next year's display. Cut the foliage back after the first hard frost in fall, not before, not because the yard looks untidy. After the frost. Every time. Plant number 5. Garden Phlox. The fragrance reaches you before the plant ever comes into view. Rich, sweet, unmistakably floral, and it's strong enough to carry across an entire yard on a warm July evening. Most people stop walking and look around, trying to identify where it is coming from. What they are smelling is garden phlox, and the flowers producing that scent happen to be among the most visually striking options available to American gardeners in the summer garden. Large rounded flower clusters, sometimes 6 to 8 inches across on established plants. In deep pink, soft pink, white, lavender, red, and bicolors that combine a colored outer edge with a contrasting center eye on each individual floret. Those clusters sit on top of stems that grow 3 to 4 feet tall. Garden Phlox belongs at the back of a border. It creates genuine vertical presence and commands the eye from the moment it opens in July. Blooming straight through September, while temperatures are still at their peak, and most other perennials have already retreated into their late-season holding pattern. Full sun, 6 hours minimum and more, is genuinely better. Moist, well-draining, fertile soil. pH 6.0 to 7.0, consistent moisture through the growing season. USDA hardiness zones 4 through 8. Garden Phlox is one of the most powerful hummingbird attractants available to American gardeners in those zones. The tubular structure of each individual floret and the color range, particularly the pinks and reds, are precisely what hummingbirds are biologically built to feed from. An established planting in full bloom from July through September draws hummingbirds back repeatedly through the peak of their activity period and straight through their fall migration south. If feeders have not been bringing hummingbirds to your yard with any reliability, put Garden Phlox in the ground. Living flowers are always available, always fresh, and always positioned exactly where the birds expect them to be. In a way no plastic feeder ever replicates. The care instruction that makes the single biggest difference with Garden Phlox is one most gardeners are afraid to follow because it looks too aggressive. In spring, when new stems emerge from the base of the plant, thin them down to 5 or 6 of the strongest and most vigorous per clump. Cut everything else straight to the ground. Most people leave every stem that emerges because more stems feels like it should mean more flowers. What overcrowded stems actually produce is poor air circulation between them. And poor air circulation creates the exact conditions powdery mildew needs to establish. The white, dusty fungal coating that is the most common problem with garden phlox and the one that makes plants look completely spent by August. 5 strong stems with good airflow between them produce healthier plants, larger flower clusters, and a significantly longer bloom period than 15-week, crowded ones ever will. Thin hard in spring, and garden phlox becomes one of the best performing plants in the entire yard. Garden Roots has been giving you zone-accurate, specific, honest gardening advice since plant number 1 of this video. And not one piece of it has been vague or generic. If this is the kind of information you want in your feed every single week, the subscribe button is sitting right below this video. Press it, and turn the notification bell on while you are there. The gardeners who get the most value out of this channel are the ones who never miss an upload, and missing one is entirely avoidable. Plant number 6. Russian Sage. Most gardeners who have tried Russian sage and been disappointed made the exact same mistake. They prepared their best garden bed, worked in rich compost, gave it fertile amended soil, and then watched the plant flop over, produce weak stems that needed staking, and bloom far less impressively than every photograph suggested it would. The plant did not fail them. The soil did. Russian sage thrives in poor ground. Not average soil, not lightly amended soil. Lean, dry, neglected ground that has never been enriched, fertilized, or heavily worked. The specimens you see performing magnificently in professional landscape plantings, those 4- and 5-foot towers of blue silver with perfect upright structure and massive quantities of bloom, are almost always growing in soil that has never received a single bag of compost. Rich, fertile soil pushes all of the plant's energy into producing lush, soft growth the stems cannot support. Floppy, weak, and underwhelming. Plant Russian sage in the worst patch of ground in your yard, and it will give you the best performance of its life. Silvery white aromatic stems completely covered in tiny lavender blue flowers from midsummer through the first hard frost. The overall effect is an airy, luminous cloud of blue-silver color that moves in the slightest breeze and catches late afternoon light in a way that looks almost iridescent. 3 to 5 feet tall. A dramatic vertical presence that creates the kind of sophisticated, professional-looking garden backdrop most home gardeners spend years trying to achieve without ever quite getting there. Blooms from July all the way through the first hard frost, making it one of the longest blooming and latest season perennials available in American horticulture. Full sun, complete, non-negotiable, no exceptions, poor to average well-draining soil. pH 6.0 to 8.0, one of the most alkaline-tolerant ranges on this entire list. That wide pH tolerance makes Russian sage genuinely valuable for gardeners across the West and Midwest, where naturally alkaline soil makes growing most flowering perennials a frustrating uphill battle. Extremely drought-tolerant once established. USDA hardiness zones 4 through 9. At gardeners in zones 8 and 9, Russian sage is one of your most valuable options on this entire list. It handles sustained summer heat, extended periods without rain, and the kind of brutal July and August conditions that eliminate most other perennials from serious consideration in those regions. When everything else in a zone 8 or 9 yard is struggling to get through midsummer, Russian sage is actively at its peak performance. 6 plants into this list, and every single one of them solves a real problem that American gardeners face every year. Poor soil, deer, shade gaps, summer heat, drought, floppy plants. If Garden Roots is solving problems in your yard that you have been dealing with for years, problems that most gardening content never addresses with this level of specificity, share this video with one person in your life who spends money every spring on flowers that do not survive the year. They need this information as much as you did before you pressed play, and if you are still watching without having subscribed yet, that is a choice worth reconsidering right now. This channel publishes every single week, Every video is built exactly like this one. Subscribe, and every one of them comes directly to you. Out of the 6 plants covered so far, Black-Eyed Susan, Salvia, Coneflower, Daylily, Garden Phlox, and Russian Sage. Which one are you putting in the ground first this season? And what USDA zone are you gardening in? Put both answers in the comments right now. Garden Roots reads every single one. And those answers directly shape what gets covered in upcoming videos on this channel. Plant number 7. Bleeding Heart. Almost every American yard has one spot that has defeated every single gardening attempt made in it. The deep shade under a large mature tree where direct sunlight never reaches. The north-facing side of the house that stays dark from morning to evening. The corner between 2 structures where everything planted has either limped along miserably for one season or simply died without explanation. Most gardeners eventually stop trying in those spots and accept the bare ground as permanent. Bleeding Heart was built for exactly that location. The flowers on this plant are so visually distinctive that most people see them for the first time and genuinely stop to stare. Graceful arching stems, gently weeping as though the plant was designed with a specific elegance in mind, hung with perfectly formed, heart-shaped flowers in deep rose pink. Each flower carries a small white inner petal that drops below the heart like a single suspended teardrop. There is nothing else in the American garden that looks quite like it, 2 to 3 feet tall, with a spreading habit that widens gently as the plant matures and settles into its permanent location. Bleeding Heart blooms in April and May, arriving earlier than most perennials have fully woken up from winter. It fills the spring garden with color at the exact moment when gardeners are most hungry for it, when the ground has been bare and brown for months and the urge to see something living and flowering is at its strongest. Partial to full shade. Moist, humus-rich, well-draining soil. pH 6.0 to 7.0. Consistent moisture through the spring flowering period. USDA hardiness zones 3 through 9. Bleeding Heart goes dormant in the summer dormant. In zones 6 through 9, as summer heat builds through June and July, the foliage begins to yellow, decline, and eventually disappear entirely. The ground where it was growing looks completely empty. Every gardener who does not know this is coming responds the same way. They assume the plant has died and dig up the spot to replant it. That is the single most common and most costly mistake made with this plant across the country every single year. The plant has not died. The root system is fully alive underground, resting through summer heat exactly the way it is biologically designed to do. It returns on schedule the following April with complete reliability. What needs to happen is planning for the empty space it leaves behind. Plant Bleeding Heart alongside hostas, Astilbe, or ferns. All 3 expand and fill in through early summer, covering the ground Bleeding Heart vacates, and keeping that area of the garden looking full and intentional through the warmest months of the year. One care instruction applies across every zone without exception. Do not move Bleeding Heart once it is planted and established. Do not divide it unless the clump has become genuinely overcrowded after many years. This plant builds a deep, specific relationship with the soil it grows in and performs best when left exactly where it was first placed. Every relocation sets it back significantly. Choose the right location before the plant goes in the ground, then commit to that spot completely and permanently. Plant number 8. Catmint. The first time most gardeners see catmint in full bloom with bees working every single stem simultaneously, they stop whatever they were doing and just watch. The concentration of pollinator activity on one plant is something most American yards never produce, and the effect it has on everything growing nearby is something most gardeners never connect back to this one plant. Every bee visiting catmint spills over into every other flowering plant in the surrounding garden. Pollination rates increase across the entire bed. Fruit set and seed production improve in every neighboring plant within reach of that pollinator traffic. For anyone growing vegetables anywhere near an ornamental border, catmint makes those vegetables measurably more productive. That is a direct, concrete benefit that goes far beyond the visual appeal of the plant itself. Soft lavender blue flower spikes rising above mounding gray-green aromatic foliage. The overall effect is soft, billowing, and harmonious with virtually every other plant color in the garden. 12 to 24 inches tall, depending on the variety. Perfect for the front of any border. The foliage itself is attractive even when the plant carries no flowers. Silver green, pleasantly textured, and aromatic in a way that makes brushing past it a genuinely sensory experience on a warm afternoon. Full sun to light shade. Well-draining soil. This is the one non-negotiable growing requirement for catmint. Standing water or consistently wet conditions will not be tolerated. Soil pH 6.0 to 8.0, an unusually wide and forgiving range that works with the naturally alkaline soils common across large parts of the Midwest and West without any amendment. Drought-tolerant once established, genuinely so, not just tolerant of briefly dry conditions, but fully capable of thriving through extended dry periods that would stress most other flowering perennials. USDA hardiness zones 3 through 8. One important clarification before going further: catmint and catnip are related plants in the same family, but they are not the same plant. Catmint, Nepeta specifically, does not produce the chemical compound that causes the behavioral response in cats that catnip does. Cats will not roll in it, seek it out, or destroy it the way they would a catnip planting. That distinction matters for anyone who has avoided this plant because of concerns about attracting neighborhood cats to the garden. Catmint blooms 3 complete times through the season when managed correctly. First flush arrives in late spring. When that flush fades in June, cut the entire plant back to approximately 4 inches from the ground. Not a light shaping, not a gentle trim. Cut it back hard. New growth pushes up from the base within a week and a half. A full second flush of bloom follows 5 to 6 weeks after that cutback. Cut it back again after the second flush, and a third bloom period arrives in early fall. 3 complete cycles from May through September from one plant. Skip the cutback because it looks too severe, and the result is one weakening bloom period that fades into straggly, tired growth by July. Follow through on it, and the result is 5 months of continuous flowering from a single planting. The gardener makes that choice in June with one cut. If catmint is the first time you have heard that a plant can be deliberately cut to the ground in summer and come back fuller and more floriferous within 6 weeks, and if that kind of specific, actionable information is what you came to Garden Roots for, there are gardeners watching this channel right now who have been subscribed for months and tell us regularly that this is the only gardening content they trust to give them zone-accurate, practical advice they can use the same week they watch it. Subscribe right now. Every video on this channel is built exactly like this one. The button is right below this video and it takes 2 seconds. Plant number 9. Baptisia. Professional garden designers know this plant well. Botanical garden curators across the country grow it consistently. Horticulturists recommend it without hesitation. The average American homeowner has never heard its name, has never seen it at their local garden center, and has absolutely no idea what their garden has been missing for years. Baptisia produces tall, upright flower spikes in deep indigo blue. A true, saturated, remarkable blue that is genuinely rare in the flowering perennial world. It blooms in May and June, filling the seasonal gap between spring bulbs and the main summer perennial season with color that stops people in their tracks. The flowers resemble lupins in their structure, pea-shaped florets arranged in dense vertical spikes. But Baptisia is significantly tougher, longer-lived, and more adaptable across the full range of American climates than lupins ever managed to be. The dense blue-green foliage that follows the flowers is attractive enough to earn its space in the garden through the entire growing season. After the flowers fade, inflated charcoal black seed pods form on the stems, almost architectural in their structure, rattling audibly in any breeze and providing genuine ornamental interest straight through fall and into winter. 3 to 4 feet tall and spreading to an equal width at full maturity. A genuine structural anchor for any garden bed, creating the kind of permanent presence that no annual flower and no short-lived perennial can ever establish. Full sun to light shade, average to poor, well-draining soil. Like Russian sage, Baptisia actively performs better in lean ground than in heavily enriched beds. Soil pH 5.5 to 7.0. Drought tolerant once fully established. USDA hardiness zones 3 through 9. Baptisia is a nitrogen fixer, the same biological process that makes beans and peas valuable in a vegetable garden happens in the root zone of every Baptisia plant. A symbiotic relationship with specific soil bacteria allows Baptisia to pull nitrogen directly from the air and deposit it into the surrounding soil in a form that every neighboring plant can access and use. One planting decision that adds dramatic beauty, structural permanence, and actively improves the soil chemistry in the surrounding bed simultaneously. The plants growing around an established Baptisia are in measurably better ground than they were before it arrived. Baptisia takes 3 full years to reach its flowering potential. Year 1, it establishes its root system underground and produces modest top growth that gives very little indication of what is coming. Year 2, the plant grows larger but still holds back its full display. Year 3. If the plant has been left completely undisturbed, never moved, never divided, never dug up out of impatience, it produces a bloom display that makes every single day of waiting feel like the most worthwhile patience exercised in the garden. Then it repeats that display the following year, and the year after that. Baptisia plants 20, 30, and 40 years old are documented across this country, still flowering reliably, still anchoring their gardens with the same structural authority they established decades earlier, never having been replaced or significantly disturbed. The only instruction that truly matters with this plant is the simplest one. Do not dig it up in year 2. Leave it alone. Give it 3 full years of complete undisturbed growth, and it will return decades of performance in exchange. Plant number 10. Astilbe. Every shaded corner of an American yard that has resisted every previous planting attempt has one solution that works consistently, performs beautifully, and asks for very little in return. Most gardeners drive right past it at the nursery without a second glance, because it does not look like much sitting in a 4-inch pot on a display table. Astilbe in full bloom in a shaded garden bed is one of the most dramatic sights in American perennial gardening, and almost nobody growing it in a sunny location has ever experienced what this plant truly does when placed in the right conditions. Feathery plume-shaped flower spikes in white, cream, soft pink, hot pink, red, lavender, and deep purple. No other shade perennial produces this kind of vertical dramatic color in low-light conditions. I'm 1 to 4 feet tall, depending on the variety selected. Early, mid, and late season varieties are all available. Plant one of each, and Astilbe blooms continuously from late spring through late summer in the same bed without any gaps in the display. Partial to full shade. Moist, humus-rich, well-draining soil. pH 6.0 to 8.0. USDA hardiness zones 3 through 9. The dried plumes that remain after bloom hold their structure through fall in bronze, tan, and rust tones that extend visual interest well past the flowering period. Astilbe pairs directly with bleeding heart. Its foliage expands and fills in exactly as bleeding heart goes dormant in early summer, eliminating the bare ground problem entirely without any additional planning required. Gardeners in zones 3 through 5. Full sun is tolerable for Astilbe if the soil stays consistently moist throughout the season. Gardeners in zones 6 through 9, afternoon shade is essential. Direct summer sun hitting dry soil burns the foliage and shortens the bloom period significantly. Amend with compost before planting and apply at least 2 inches of mulch after. Keep that mulch away from the crown. Consistent moisture is the one requirement Astilbe will not negotiate on, and mulch is what makes maintaining that moisture manageable without daily watering. Plant number 11. Hosta. The most requested shade solution in American gardening is also the most misunderstood plant on this entire list. Most people grow hostas exclusively for the foliage and never realize that the flowers, the wildlife value, and the structural role this plant plays in a shaded garden are equally as important as the leaves that drew them to it in the first place. Bold, architectural foliage in solid green, rich gold, deep blue-green, and dramatic bicolor combinations with white or yellow margins. Some varieties carry leaves the size of a dinner plate. The visual weight a mature hosta brings to a shaded bed is something no other plant in that light condition replicates. Tall spikes of lavender to white tubular flowers open in July and August, and on fragrant varieties, the scent carries across a yard on a summer evening in a way that surprises everyone who assumed hostas were purely a foliage plant. Those flower spikes draw hummingbirds and bees into shaded corners that most other nectar sources never reach. 6 inches to 4 feet tall and equally wide at full maturity depending on the variety. Partial to full shade. Moist, well-draining, fertile soil. pH 6.0 to 7.5. Consistent moisture. USDA hardiness zones 3 through 9. Slug damage is the most common complaint American gardeners have about hostas. Small, irregular holes appearing in the foliage through spring and early summer. Iron phosphate bait applied in early spring before visible damage begins prevents the problem entirely without posing any risk to birds, pets, beneficial insects, or children. Apply it early and the problem never develops. Wait until the damage is already visible and the season's foliage is already compromised. Hostas divide cleanly every 3 to 5 years. Each division establishes quickly and reaches full size within 2 growing seasons. When planted alongside Bleeding Heart and Astilbe, these 3 plants together solve every shade garden problem in one combined decision. Spring color from Bleeding Heart, summer plumes from Astilbe, and season-long architectural foliage from Hosta, creating a shaded bed that looks intentional, full, and beautiful from April through October. Gardeners in zones 8 and 9. Morning sun only, with afternoon shade mandatory. Choose varieties specifically labeled for heat tolerance in southern gardens. Gardeners in zones 3 through 5. Hostas are among the most cold-hardy perennials available and need no special winter protection whatsoever. 11 plants. Every single one of them was purchased once and never replaced. A yard that fills back up every spring on its own, gets fuller every year, feeds birds through February, and draws hummingbirds in July, and costs less to maintain every season than what most American gardeners spend on annuals in a single April afternoon. If garden roots just changed how you think about your yard permanently, share this video with one person in your life right now. One neighbor, one family member, one friend who spends real money every spring on flowers that are gone by October. Send it to them today, not later. And if you watched every plant on this list and you are still not subscribed to this channel, the subscribe button is directly below this video. Press it. The next video covers something that will completely change how you approach fall planting, and every gardener watching this needs to be there for it. Before this video ends, one final question for the Garden Roots community. Which plant on this list of 11 are you putting in the ground first? And what is the one gardening mistake you made this past season that you are absolutely not repeating again? Drop both answers in the comments below. Every single response gets read on this channel. The answers shape what Garden Roots covers next. And the responses to that second question are always the most honest and most useful ones in the entire comment section.